We are live.
Wesley, would you like me to take this part or would you like to take it?
Go ahead, Ann. I'm pulling up some things on my computer, so if you want to go ahead.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our subcommittee meeting this afternoon for the Licensure Subcommittee group. Wesley and I are both here today. I'm thankful for my co-partner in crime to be here. So we have a couple things that we need to approve before we get started, starting with our agenda. So could we have a motion, please, to approve the agenda, which is should be on your screen so that you can see. These are the things that we want to make sure we talk about today. And we put times today because we want to make sure we get through all the feedback and start coming up with what ideas we have for change. So could I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved, Connie.
Thank you, Connie.
Second, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Any discussion? I'm sorry. Okay. Any discussion? All in favor for those that are here today to approve the agenda, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. The second thing we need to approve are our minutes from our March 31st, 2022 meeting. Kim sent those out to everyone. Thank you, Kim. And so we would like a motion to approve the minutes from March 31st, 2022. Somebody make a motion, please.
So moved. This is Vivian.
Thank you, Vivian. And a second?
Second, Tamika.
Thank you, Tamika. Any corrections, changes, or questions on the minutes? All those in favor of approving the minutes from March 31st, please respond by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so that's our, what we have to start every meeting with. Those are our little housekeeping rules. So we also review the norms, right? So we have 7 norms for our meetings. So the goal here is, again, I particularly want to make sure that we refer to number 3, where all opinions are valued, because there was some question around that last time. So I want to make sure that we understand that everyone has a right. So Wesley and I try to leave a very transparent subcommittee. So these are our norms. So that's a review of that. And the guiding principles, of course, are: do our ideas have impact on students? Is it measurable in an authentic setting? Which is what's supposed to be leading our work around setting our options for this licensure model. These are the subcommittee responsibilities and priorities. We are the yellow. So that's why there's the number of licensure levels. We also we've talked a lot about the measures, effectiveness measures, duration of the licensure levels, what happens if someone doesn't meet a licensure level, and licensure renewal, which we have not really talked a lot about, or at all, really. Not that I remember. You can correct me if I'm wrong about licensure renewal. We will continue with and then the other colors are the other subcommittees. So any questions on this one? Okay, so there are 3 levels that we have not had an opportunity to provide feedback on, and then that will be, after we do these feedback sessions, our next step will be to start thinking about what changes we want to make or suggest for the different licensure levels as part of our work here, and what measures we would maybe use instead of what's there, et cetera, all of those types of things. So that'll be our work through the summer as well. So let's start with, go ahead, Kim, you're good. Let's start with, this is license 4. So this is, past the beginning teacher stage, right? So we're now into, I'm past the quote, what I call the beginning teacher stage. So we will start with things we like about this and things that we have concerns about and questions about at this level. From our, and this could be around our measures or about rules if somebody doesn't, or renewal or any of that kind of stuff. All that's in our purview.
Kim, when we were looking at the timeline for this model, about how many subcommittee meetings do you anticipate us having left before something is fully sent to the PEPS Commission for consideration?
So we have, including this one, we have 2 more.
Okay.
So June and July.
Right.
And I'm sorry that I left that timeline out of this PowerPoint.
That's fine. I just thought it'd be important to note for everyone on the call.
I can show that at the end, Dr. Wood, if you'd like me to bring that up.
That's fine. I was just wanted to point that out just so that folks would know,
Sure.
kind of based on the timeline, about how many more opportunities is at least scheduled to provide, concerns or things they like or dislike about, the topics today, so that it would encourage people to share if they had something they want the subcommittee to know.
Sure. Thank you.
I apologize. I thought those were the ones at the end, but I see that's not what that is. So that would be great if we could bring that up so everybody could see. Okay, so back to level 4, license 4. And if you're putting stuff in the chat, I don't know it. So there could be something.
This is Vivian. I have a question about the obligations.
Okay, go ahead, Vivian.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm trying to eat my lunch because I've been in meetings all day and I'm hungry. It says the obligations could so if you have a license, if you are at license 4, you must open your classroom to observation and you must conduct peer observations. Correct?
That's how it's written. We don't have to agree with it, but that's how it's written. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm understanding what that says. So I think, I've expressed this concern before. There are many wonderful teachers who will want to mentor and do other things, but there may be some who just want to teach and can really grow a kid. And I know there's provisions for them to, as long as they get the growth or the peer, they can get additional compensation. But this says, the way it's written, that I guess everyone has to do that. I'm not sure I fully support that.
Okay. You mean the second 2, right? Not the addressing the improvement priorities, but the being observed and conducting observations.
Yes, I would think all teachers would be doing the first one.
Yeah.
And be continuing to work, hopefully.
Right. I guess another question around the last 2 and 3, as I'll call them, would be, how is that monitored? Who monitors that? Or is that just if you're, if practicable or if open to it, right? Like, why is that on a licensure level?
This is Brenda, if I can follow on that. Vivian, I completely agree with you. I think at this level, we're talking about more than 70% of teachers are licensed 4 or higher. Let's say 20% are advanced roles. That means about 50% of, this is again, my rough guesses, but let's say, 50% of teachers are in this frame. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are the right people to do peer observations, or even the right people to open their classroom for observations. So I agree completely that this would be, maybe these would be not obligations, but might also kind of do. It seems like observations could be, if you qualify for advanced roles, that you should do
Yeah.
And I don't quite like that terminology, Brenda, that you just used, that they're not the right people to conduct peer observations.
I'm not saying
There are some really awesome teachers who may not wish to do that. And there are lots of other ways to show leadership besides doing those two things.
agree.
Agree, if I could finish, please. If we really want teacher leaders, there are other things these licensed board teachers could be doing, like supervising student teachers.
My apologies if it was construed that, if it came across that way. Yes, both can be true. They might not be the right classrooms for these, and they may not choose to do it. And I don't think they should be obligated in this to do it. So thank you for letting me clarify that, Vivian.
Hey, this is Chris. I guess I did have one question about the peer observations too when I was reading through that, and I know we've talked about them already. But so at the building level, when we say conduct peer observations, are we talking about the formal peer observations that go in NESIS? Because I do think that if we are going to leave that as an obligation, we're going to have to acknowledge that there's only a certain number of those that are going to be able to be assigned. And especially in some of the smaller buildings, they may have, because it depends on how many teachers you have on the comprehensive cycle is how many peer observations you would even need.
I don't know that I know the answer to that question. Wesley, do you know?
I do not. I kind of like the idea of the obligations on those being like suggested obligations, determined by the LEA. I mean, everybody's setup is different, and I think we would expect those expert teachers to be taking on some leadership role, but I don't know that can't be determined, at the individual school level. Because we have a lot of teachers doing peer observations. We're sending teachers quite often to master teachers or experienced teachers to observe their classrooms. So I kind of like the idea of those being suggested obligations that can be handled, documented, and or whatever means need to take place at the school level. I don't know how others feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, we could suggest something like, Tamika, then you're next. We could suggest something like contributes to the profession. Something very general at the school level, school and district level. Things that they would correlate with. So,
I think you mentioned, or somebody mentioned, how would this be, documented or
measured? Yeah,
I don't know that it can. That's why I say it may need to be suggested leadership obligations or something of that nature.
Yeah. All right, Tamika, your turn.
Thanks. So I know you asked us about something that we liked. And so one of the things that I think I like is having the 5-year window, of course, to be able to demonstrate effectiveness. I do have questions regarding still choosing which measure to demonstrate effectiveness through EVAS or the qualitative growth review, because I know there's still lots of questions around what entails a qualitative growth review. So like as an arts teacher, like I would probably choose that, but as of right now, I still don't know what's in it or like how that's going to be measured. And then of course, the second area of concern I have is around student surveys, particularly just thinking about your elementary teachers and doing student surveys, because it says you got to have observations and student surveys, and we know that doing student surveys at an elementary level would not be practical. So those are some things that I have concerns about.
Okay, thank you, Tamika. And we have student surveys on our whole agenda, like as a separate topic, right, today, because we've had so much back and forth about it. And that's good that people have good input on that. So I appreciate you bringing those up here. All right. Anything else on this one?
Hi, I have my hand up. I'm not sure if you can see it. This is Melissa. I want to also support the idea that this is probably not the right level to have an obligation to conduct observations or to open a classroom to observation for all of the reasons that have been discussed. I'll say that I would not even include it as a suggested at this level, unless it was, again, like really focused on like the apprentice teacher or a student teacher, somebody who's learning to be a teacher but not currently a teacher, like nothing sort of formal, no formal role. My sense was that was why we had the 2 advanced teacher licenses, was to actually formalize those types of responsibilities. And I feel like by sort of kind of putting them in as a suggestion for license 4, we're actually muddying the waters instead of clarifying them, particularly if this is supposed to be a licensure exercise, as opposed to, districts will make some choices about how certain roles are developed. Along that line, I would like to offer some feedback regarding the title of license 4, which is expert teacher. To me, the word expert conveys like advanced. And to the point that was made, like this is probably like the vast majority of the teachers in the system. I would suggest like professional teacher or something like that. That is typically like what this level has been throughout history, is like you're considered this is your sort of like professional teacher license. Expert, I think, does sort of start to make it sound like there should be some additional responsibilities and expectations that I actually don't think are appropriate for this level.
I actually agree with changing the title of this one. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if professional is the right title, but I do think where they are I don't know that I think expert is correct. I think that's a good suggestion. Not that I need to make a comment about everybody's suggestion, but I do think that's a good suggestion. Any other comments on that?
This is Lee. I have a little bit of a different comment. That's okay.
Yes.
So in the first, one of the following demonstrate effectiveness 3 qualifying years within a 5-year window. But then with the other things, there's no timeline. So is it 1 observation or is it 3 observations? Is it, if those obligations were to stay in there, is it 1 year of those, 3 years of those? Is that something to think about?
Okay, that's a great question. Yeah, we don't have necessarily have the answer to that, and we can suggest something. Also, as part of our, because part of our responsibility is how long someone stays in a licensure level, so we could suggest something around that, Leah, as well. Not necessarily today, but just in general.
Sure, just something you might want to take a look at. Yeah.
Yeah. Someone else said something. I don't know who it was. I apologize.
It's okay. It's Melissa. I had just one more comment also on the effectiveness, like how we're measuring effectiveness, and whether, I guess I went back and forth sort of thinking about, okay, the research shows that there's actually more bias in the sort of observation piece than there is in the value added or growth measure. The value added part of a growth measure. I can't say that about the qualitative growth review. And I think the way that a few states, I think, have creatively gotten around sort of the either or piece is to use more of like a matrix model where you'd have to have at least a certain level on each of these like various pieces to kind of move forward. So I don't know that we would want someone, for example, who had, great effectiveness on EVAS, let's say, but had really low peer ratings, for example, or really low student survey ratings, right? That it isn't just like one or the other, it's both. And I would recommend having some sort of, again, matrix, like where sort of the more like observational student feedback measures on one side and the growth measure on the other, and have basically, some overlap between those things that says like, yes, you meet the criteria or you don't. So that's just one thought, because I'm not sure that making an either or is going to be as effective at identifying kind of who's at this level.
From the standpoint of PPI, when you guys were putting this draft together and you incorporated those two things, was there any background discussion of the vision of the peer process and how long or at what point that would take place during that those years of holding that license?
So, Dr. Wood, specifically the peer recommendation of how long it would transpire, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, just any background information of conversation around that peer process that may help answer that question of at what point during holding that license is that measured versus the effectiveness of 3 out of 5 years. Just curious if there's any thought process behind incorporating that and any discussion around that timeline.
No, I think for those of us who worked on it, I think we envisioned the same timeline, but the feedback from Lee is accurate. We did not articulate that explicitly in this model. So I think we all assumed that would also, the peer review would also be a 3 out of 5 year window.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Tamika?
So I did have two things. So one, I do like the term expert teacher. I think according to this model, that if by the time a person reaches this particular designation, they would have already demonstrated over multiple measures a mastery of content and pedagogy, and that anything beyond this would be advanced. But I do like the term expert teacher. And then I also had a clarifying question in the peer section around requirements. So that first bullet says that you have to be accomplished on standards 2, 3, and 4 of NESA's, and then directly following that it says no rating below proficient. So is proficient, you have to be at least at the minimum proficient on 2, 3, and 4, or or is the minimum that you have to be accomplished on 2, 3, and 4? Because there's not clarity there.
I read it as you have to be accomplished on 2, 3, and 4, and then on 1 and 5. And I'm assuming that's the overall rating for that, right? So, and then 1 and 5, you have to be at least proficient. That's the way. And I think there's still a SITS, right? SITS and 7. Is there still a SITS and 7?
There is for principal, but not for teacher.
Okay, yeah. So, all right. That's the way I read it. Does anybody disagree with that, or is that incorrect?
But is it a preponderance of the evidence in standard 2 has to be accomplished? So there's 7 indicators and 4 are accomplished and 3 are proficient, so you're accomplished? Or does every indicator have to be accomplished? Because for our CTC form, for our student teachers, they have to be, every indicator on every standard has to be proficient. So right. I think that needs to be clarified.
Okay, we can certainly clarify it.
Yeah, it would help you just decide, is it an overall rating of accomplished or an overall rating of proficient? Right.
I guess the way I read that was that in the summative, that the overall rating on the standard would need to be accomplished. But again, that's just the way I read it, so I don't know.
But I think that interpretation is probably correct, just as it mentions NESA's. That's the process for the summative rating on NESA's, but I also understand the other points that, a principal could rate somebody accomplished when in reality they are not accomplished totally in the standard. They should be, but we can have some folks rate individuals that are not meeting that expectation.
Yeah. All right, I wrote it down. So did Kim. All right. All right, so I think our time's probably up on this one. Kim, is that
Yes,
correct?
that's right.
This is Connie. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'm sorry. My internet popped off, and I had to jump off and restart. So if this question has already been answered, pardon me. I had two questions, and I think the last one was just answered. That was the question about proficiency and accomplished, so that has been addressed. The other question is going back to the salary for license 4 at $56,000. When we look at teachers now at the top of the scale, they are barely making 58 with the advanced degree, and with the doctoral degree at the top of the scale, they're making 59. So we're making, going back to this license 4, if a person has 5 years degree, 5 years of experience, and has been able to distinguish themselves as an expert teacher, they're going to start off, they're going to be at 56. Is that what we're saying? Can you hear me?
I did. That's the way I read it. That's on budget and compensation, but.
So from the budget and compensation subcommittee, that is what will happen. 56,000 would be the salary for someone who qualifies for a license 4. And
Yes.
what could potentially qualify that for that license in as few as 5 years.
Did you hear that, Connie? Connie? Not really.
Can you hear me? I don't know what's going on this end.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Did you hear what Tom said?
I didn't hear all of what Tom said. I heard your comment when you were asking me if could you repeat that, Tom, please?
Sure.
Yeah, I can tell you what he said. He said that, yes, this would be the salary. Correct, Tom?
That is correct.
Yes. I think that's great for an expert teacher, but I also think about in today's world where we're at, where we're trying to recruit teachers, and you're getting someone at the top of the scale with a doctoral degree that's only making 59, and you have someone with 5 years that, I don't know, I'm just concerned about how teachers are going to view that.
All right. We wrote it down. Thank you, Connie. Noted. All right. Let's move this to the next level, Kim, please.
And this is Brenda Berg, if I could.
Yeah, can you speak up just a little bit?
Yeah, sorry. I just didn't want to interrupt. Two quick things I put in the chat. If we could consider adding that as an optional obligation, they could host an apprentice teacher. I didn't want to get that lost in the conversation. We talked, I can't remember which subcommittee talked about this, but the idea that it would be optional, that it's not required, but in some cases, I think Maureen, you mentioned that in some cases a teacher feels like they're in a good place to host them, in some places they don't. And then second, I'm also on the budget committee, and so I'd love, Tamika, if we could take offline, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you were just talking about this would not be an increase for most teachers. It seems like it would be, so I'd love to see your data if you don't mind sending that my way, and I can take it back to the budget committee.
And Anne, if I could just add one thing really quick too, it's Maureen.
Sure.
So just, we are using impact and effectiveness and growth, and those words are really closely tied to EVOS. And really what we're trying to do is look at a teacher's impact or growth or effectiveness on kids for the entire school year, not for one day at one point and on one test. And so I brought up in the subcommittee chairs meeting that maybe we could consider a language change to continuously improving students. So that reflects that what we're looking at is a student better on day 180 for elementary and middle or day 90 for high school than they were on day 1 because they were in your classroom.
All right, thank you, Maureen.
Dr. Bullock, this is Jeff Coltrane. If I can add one more thing as well.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Sorry to clarify on that salary, and I know Dr. Tomlin's also on the call, but the $56,000 proposal is the base salary. And the Budget and Compensation Committee this morning approved adding to this that they recommend, or the subcommittee recommends, that master's pay and national board certification currently remain as it is. So that would mean that any teacher with an advanced degree or national board certification would get that 10% or 12% supplement on top of the $56,000 salary. So that might make it more equitable to what Dr. Locklear was sharing with where some of those advanced degree teachers are now, is that $56,000 is currently not available at any level of the A salary schedule. I'm not sure about the doctoral degree. That's a good question. But the current salary schedule tops out just above $52,000. But that base salary would be higher than the current base salary for A-level license in North Carolina. And then the supplements would be on top of that.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Connie, does that help? Help with your concern, if you're still with us?
Yes, I'm still with you. My concern, I understand what everyone's saying. I'm saying at 56, if a teacher only has 5 years, but they're considered an expert teacher, and they're making 56, and you have someone, I'm sitting here looking at teacher salary now for this year. So you're looking at a teacher with a let's see, a doctoral degree or an advanced degree, let's say an advanced degree, and they're at 26 plus years, they're only making 58. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I understand the need for I'm just trying to think about how teachers are going to view this. And they have put their life into education, and now, and we all know that sometimes when you get into schools, and I've taught AP students, I've taught students that were not AP, I taught honors kids, and there's a different level. And I just think that we need to think about how teachers are going to view this. That's my only concern.
Thank you. Okay.
I think you're probably referencing current teachers current teachers now that will have to be grandfathered in some level of licensure when all that's worked out. That's what you're addressing, right?
Okay, let's move on to this 4 plus 10%. Okay. So this is completing the requirements for license 1 through 4, or for license 4, sorry. So this is where you are. This one of the following. So this has the 3 out of 5 years. On this one, a note, Tamika, that on the peer one here, that it says 3 out of the 5 years on this slide. So that's probably needs to be put over there if we keep that. Student survey seems to be the same. Supports obligations here. So this is advanced teacher. I open the floor. Do we have any of the same comments on this that we had on the last one? Because this has the peer observations. This has the model the lessons, a little bit higher level here. Tamika, yes.
Yes, so I do, because still in that peer section, it says you have to be distinguished, and it says no rating below accomplished. So just trying to figure that piece out, just like in the prior.
Okay.
But I also just have a question about this designation and the one after it, because they kind of go together. Right now, we have these as licenses for teaching, but they are dependent on whether or not the school district can even offer these positions to educators. So is there a reason that we are looking at them as licenses and not as special certifications or endorsements that aren't tied to licensure?
Kind of like a something you would put on your license, so to say?
Yes, like if I have a AIG endorsement on my license, right? If I have a position, I can apply for it, but my regular license is still intact.
Okay. What do other people think of that? Sorry, Tamika, I'm putting your idea out there and see what people think of it.
This is Vivian. I don't know if I completely agree, but I had a similar concern. The way I understood this was people could get this license and do all of this and keep it, but if there was not a position available, they could not move into that position. I think that's the way DPI staff explained it. Somebody correct me if I don't have it right. So I could keep this license, but it's an employment thing. It's kind of like, it reminds me like the tech facilitator. People call it the tech facilitator license. It's really not, it's not the kind of license, that's actually the job you work in with a particular license. So I don't know I'm quite where Tamika is yet, but I'm like on the road to that kind of same question. Which I guess is no different if I have an MSA, but I'm not acting as a principal. So I think we have some of that already. But my concern is when people see this, they see this potential to get to 61 and 72, but we're not talking about the limited number of those positions there really are going to be. And I know we started this, we talked about, helping with the shortage that people may choose to work in another district or drive in another district to take one of these positions to get more money. And I think if we sell it that way or we talk about it that way, but I see a lot of people talking about 61 and 72. So number one, there's a lot of work for that I don't know is because people just see the model and not this background information. So that concerns me. And then also the limited number of positions there will be to do these, I don't think is really getting out there.
If I could answer some of that. This is Brenda.
Brenda?
Yeah.
Speak up a little bit, okay?
Sure, absolutely. Dr. Cummington, great questions. We talked about this morning in budget as well. The estimates based on what we've seen, again, 9% of the schools in the state are now doing advanced teaching roles. And for anybody who hasn't seen it, we have a policy brief on our website quantifying all that. Over 900 teachers are currently in advanced teaching roles. When you look at the numbers across the state, if it were to be scaled statewide, and again, we don't recommend doing it as a tear the Band-Aid off, force everybody to do it approach. It really needs to be something that is staged in. But it would be about 20% roughly of teachers who would have that opportunity, their positions. So a meaningful 1 in 5, if you're just thinking about the hallway that you're in, it's not like one position in the school or one instructional position or one principal position. You're talking about 20% roughly, maybe 15% would be in that leadership role and 5% in this extended role. So it is a pretty significant amount of access that teachers would have. And I think that's an important misperception that we need to make sure that we're communicating, is that this is a very, very attainable role for people who choose to go into these roles. And there may be people, and we've seen it in advanced roles, who come in and out depending on where their life is, where their kids are, what their, and this is not uncommon in other professions where people take on leadership roles and maybe step back and go forward. It's a lattice, not a ladder. So I just wanted to address that. And I had one other thing separate of that to add, is that in most of these districts, under obligations would be something around teaching a greater number of teachers. And I think teaching a greater number of students, and or a harder classroom, which I think is open for discussion on what that would mean. But right now, I think there's a lot of conversation and stress around class size. And this might be an opportunity to kind of define that, hey, if you are in this position, you're getting paid to take on more kids, and really have a conversation about what the cap might be for an expert teacher, and therefore what these people in this role could get paid to do beyond that sort of class size, because I know we don't have a cap beyond third grade. This might be an opportunity to have that kind of conversation. So just a thought.
May I jump in here? I have my hand up. I don't know if anyone can see it. This is Melissa. I appreciate all the great thinking people are putting on this particular license. I wanted to weigh in on I think, Vivian, and maybe I misunderstood, but my understanding is that this license would not be, you would not have additional responsibilities if you held this license and didn't actually have a position in the district. So first of all, I just wanted to confirm that that's correct. Like, you would only take on additional responsibilities if you were actually getting the salary and the district role. Is that something that DPI can confirm?
That was the way it was modeled here. That is correct.
Okay. So I think in terms of, having a concern that somebody is like doing more, but like not getting the role and the salary, I think that's hopefully not a concern. I do, though, have a concern that the certain districts, perhaps districts that are more affluent, would have more ability to have these types of positions, and that less affluent districts would not be able to, and that it would actually, it could lead to even greater inequitable access to our best teachers for some of the students who most need them. And so I was curious, I can't remember if there was anything in the proposal about having the state basically fund positions, like fund some of these positions, like a minimum number of positions in the lower income districts that may not have the same tax base to be able to fund these types of positions. So it's something I think is worth us discussing. I don't know if that's something the budget committee has talked about.
It is.
Yeah. Currently, the advanced roles are in majority Title I schools, and they're in both rural and urban school, or rural and non-rural schools across the state. So it's been kind of proof tested. The difference with the budget committee is that the budget committee is recommending, I don't know what it comes out to be, but probably $300 million in additional funds, because currently districts are funding them from within their budgets, and the funds would come from having state funds would make that a lot easier to do and quicker to be able to implement across the state. But they are actually, ironically, the Title I schools, the rural schools, higher poverty schools, if you look at the finance charts on our website, actually do receive more funding per pupil. And so they found that they have more funding flexibility to fund these roles. So North Carolina, kudos to North Carolina for being in a position to do that.
That's great. Thank you so much for clarifying that. And then just my last piece is I hadn't heard the information about the extended classroom size in prior conversations. I know we had talked a little bit about some of the like extended reach models and sort of thinking about how these different licensure levels could maybe help facilitate that. But my sense was that the research on the expanded class size was not as effective, or was sort of mixed evidence about whether that was a viable approach, and didn't know if there was more recent data. I think the last data I saw from Public Impact was probably, 4 or 5 years ago maybe. So I don't know if there's more information on where that thinking came from.
Yeah, that's also not on here. So on the license, on this information that we have, it's also not on here. So I don't know I don't know if that's an idea. Brenda, is that somewhere, or is that just an idea that you are floating out there?
It's currently in the statute let me see if I can find that language again, but there's something in the statute about extending reach to more students as one method. To your point, Melissa, about public impacts research, they definitely lean more toward the extended teacher leader roles, that they are more impactful. But what they did find is that having this sort of interim position for people who don't want to take on leadership roles and frankly can have a greater impact, that it's for a small percentage, like small, it's still 5%, it's still quite a bit, but that it can have an impact on student outcomes, but not as much of an impact on student outcomes as having a teacher leader who's distributing leadership in the school more evenly and effectively. So lesser impact, but also lesser pay, so therefore probably commensurate.
Okay. All right, if you have that resource and that statute and want to put it in the chat for other people to see that, if you have it accessible, Brenda, that would be great.
I'll put the brief in first and I'll see if I can find it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Deborah had a question in the chat that it said, I'd say it's a affiliate question in terms of, it says, what systems are being put in place for DPI to process this substantial increase in processing licensure add-ons? So Deborah, thank you for putting that in the chat. We can see if there's an answer to that today, or we can write that down as a systems piece that will need to be handled.
Dr. Bullock, I could answer that.
Okay.
We're currently in the process of conducting an RFP for a new licensure system. And part of the requirements for that RFP were that it is a system that can handle changes and even complex changes to our licensing process, even unknown ones. And so that kind of forethought went into the planning of our new licensure system.
Okay. Thank you very much. So there seems to be a plan, Deborah. So that's a good question. All right. Anything else on this one before we move to the plus 30%, which will have some of the same things on it? Tamika, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with an additional question, because the way that this particular license is written is that this individual would be working across like the school district level. And so is there a description that writes this license as somebody who is not working in a district level, that incorporates the fact that additional information that you might have larger class sizes? So is there like another way that also explains this licensure position if you are not working in district level?
You broke up at the very end to me. Do you want to repeat that last couple sentences?
Yeah, no, it's just saying, is there another way that describes this licensure level, this advanced teacher classroom excellence level, for somebody who is not working in the district? So what does it look like if your district doesn't offer a position, but you've taken on additional responsibilities to include, like in large class sizes, which was mentioned earlier? Is there a descriptor for that that's different than this one, right?
Okay. All right. Thank you.
We kind of talked about this a little bit last week. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the adult leadership role that actually would not be serving as a classroom teacher, or am I incorrect that also includes the advanced teacher role as well?
So the way this model was written, the adult leadership role would not have their own classroom, but we were required to be in the classrooms of the teachers they support on a full-time basis. The classroom excellence would have their own classroom. It could be expanded. We purposely didn't write in how we would propose to districts to do this. But if you look back at the license 1, it has been recommended that that is not a teacher of record, but a co-teacher of record with a license 4 or higher. So you could see a situation where you had this classroom excellence teacher with the classroom and maybe a cooperating license 1 teacher with him or her. But that's implementation, and we try to stay away from implementation.
I think that answers or hopefully answers the question of, is there enough positions available at that level? Because I think those would be unlimited, but it does raise the question about the adult leadership and how many positions would be available for a district, along with all the other questions and concerns I think that come along with equity and observations, and as far as the peer process of not moving. You know, we may have some districts out there who push teachers through the license tracks inaccurately, and end up with lots of teachers who may qualify for the adult leadership role, but no opportunity for them to be in that role because of the need for the classroom teachers. So just a comment on that.
I had, and I know the class size stuff is something that wasn't on there and was brought up, but I guess I did have a comment on that. That's going to me, if that ever were to be added to it, that's going to be pretty tricky because that's determined by enrollment. And then, there's, especially like at the high school level, that depends on course request and the number of teachers teaching each section and all that. So I don't know how you would necessarily allocate additional students in some scenarios.
Okay, I'm going to write that down as a piece as well. I think that's a good point.
Dr. Bullock, I dropped the language that's in the newer model on there. It says allows teachers to serve students at increased capacity. Doesn't necessarily say if that's more students or if that's an increased capacity of that teacher maybe to, go in a classroom and assist. So,
right.
And again, most people see that and think more students. So that I think that does need clarification.
All right, very good. So, all right, let's move to, thank you, Kim.
I'm sorry, I have one question before we move to the next one. Could someone at DPI for License 4 just clarify what it means to meet the License 4 renewal requirements but not meet the advanced designation?
Dr. Bullock, if you would like, I could address that.
Sure, that'd be great.
Go back one slide, maybe, where it says that.
Yes. So you can see that the requirements for the license are different for an advanced teacher. So for the classroom excellent teacher, that's if you go back a couple of slides, Kim, to the requirements for a license 4 expert teacher. So this is a greater than 0 EBOS or meeting expectations on a qualitative growth review or accomplished. And then for the advanced roles, you have a little higher standard for that. So at the time of renewal, the person could meet, if they met the standards for the license 4, but not the advanced roles, the license would be renewed at the license 4 level, but they would not be able to renew the advanced teacher designation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. I think I continuously get confused that it's the same license number for this expert teacher, professional teacher level as it is for the advanced teacher roles. So it may just be like, for clarity's sake, maybe easier just to like have the advanced teachers be like license 5. But maybe it's just me that has a hard time sort of following that through, like just in terms of like talking about it in statute and regulation and guidance, it might be easier to make that distinction.
Well, Tamika had brought up that maybe these could be endorsements on the license or whatever word we want to use, certifications, areas that are on the license. So you would have a license for, and then you would have a designation of what here is, 4 plus 10%, 4 plus 30%. So that would be another way to distinguish it by keeping it the same license with, there's got to be something, right? There's got to be something somewhere so somebody would note. Tamika, do you want to say something else about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason why I asked that, because of the way that it's currently written. These are all in license 4. They're just, and as the language that we're using, these are different. The advanced classroom teacher and the advanced adult leadership are all extra designations. So if they're all licensed 4, then why wouldn't we have them as additional certificates or endorsements that someone can add on to their license rather than creating a whole new license category for these roles?
Yeah, to me, they're just their positions, their employment. They're not another license. They're designated by employment needs.
Dr. Bullock, this is Jeff Coltrane, and I think what Tamika just described and you described, the way that I've thought about this is these are actually not licenses, they're certifications, endorsements, similar to what you would get if you become certified for teaching AIG. I think ESL may be a certification. There's also a global teacher certification that you can get. And so it's something that's an add-on to your license. And so I think the way that Tamika described it makes sense. I think from the last comment, these are positions that you would have to have the certification for, but a teacher could get this certification but not be hired into a position. So if I was in the classroom and I was interested in an advanced role, I could get the certification, and then whenever a position opens, I could apply for it. So I'd have to have the certification to get the position, but it wouldn't be that it was limited to only people who are in the position.
Okay. All right. Jeff, did you want to say something, or you lit up? I'm just checking.
Oh, no, I think it was just probably, yeah, no, I just said what I needed to say.
Okay, all right, thanks. All right, let's go to the plus 30%. All right, so we're, all right, so we have some of the same things. Here it does say 3 out of 5 years, 3 out of 5 years. It has a micro endorsement on adult leadership on here. That's the difference. There's supports. So this one provides coaching and leadership, and whatever the last obligation means, to address formative aspects of the North Carolina evaluation process. So I would think that would need to be clarified. So the question is, are these obligations, or these, you could, again, you don't have these obligations if you hold this license and don't have a position to do such things. So the question, I think a question for us is, do these obligations, are these more like, kind of like job description pieces that we're writing down as obligations? Okay, what else on this one that might be different?
I like your suggestion about these being more about job obligations as opposed to, like, they aren't obligations to attain the license, they're obligations once you have attained a position. They're like expectations, I guess, perhaps. My question is about time and what North Carolina can do through the licensure process in terms of the like obligations and expectations to ensure that there is actually time allocated for advanced teachers to do these sort of additional obligatory or expectation pieces of their roles, because I know that that is an area right now where there's a lot of pain points around teacher leaders finding the time to do all of the things that they're responsible for within the sort of normal working hours, and was curious if there was any thinking or plans to kind of provide some ideas for structures that would help facilitate actually having these successful positions in schools.
Yeah, this is Vivian. I do think some structure is necessary so that different districts don't start requiring different things at this level. So, we're short an L for AL, and so we're going to have you do XYZ in addition, because you're getting a salary. I think it's important to have some common things across the state if folks are going to do this job.
And maybe that's where the obligations kind of started, right? Like, this is what you would sort of do. I'm just reading into what I'm reading. But then it's, that could be where those came from. You think about it like that. Not that they're, not that they're all clear, but, you're here. This is kind of what would be expected. But I think that's a good point. Any feedback from the school districts on that, those comments about some common expectations for this?
And again, sorry to pep it back in, but like whether under supports, there needs to be something around time and ensuring that there's structures to ensure that maybe more so for the classroom excellence teacher, not sure, but to like actually provide time for teachers to be able to like step out and like view another teacher's classroom who's modeling instruction, or to join a professional learning community, or to do some of these things that are supports for other teachers, and like how it's all going to fit together, because ultimately it's like a big integrated network of individuals working together. And I think that's ultimately what the goal of this new licensure system is to create more collaboration and more space for teachers to be interacting with each other. But unless there is clear and thoughtful structures in place in order to do that, then I don't want this to fail because of that. So I guess I'm just wondering under supports whether there needs to be something written more about like how time should be used, or what structures are in place to support the use of the ability for teachers to mentor each other and collaborate with each other and participate in these types of learning networks.
Yeah, I wrote that down. And I don't know if those things need to be on the license. I'm back to what's on the license versus what the job looks like. If the state's giving you this plus 30% for this X number of positions, then is that another document that's correlated with a license, right? I'm not sure. And I know that's somewhat semantics, but I think putting things on a license and then, because again, anyone could hold this, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing the obligations if they just hold this license. They could hold it, they could do it, but that doesn't mean they necessarily hold that position. I think the MSA example is a really good one to think about. Like you could have an MSA, but that doesn't mean that you're a principal or assistant principal. So.
Yeah, I think it's more in like trying to motivate people to want the license, is to like ensure that they understand what the role entails, both the expectations of what they need to do and also the expectations of what will be provided to them in terms of support. So that was just the piece that I was.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just don't know if it's on like quote the license or like how it's semantically how it would come out. But I think it needs to be more than what's written here, even, right? So also how districts would use the funds. So,
yeah,
go ahead.
Because if you had a separate document or process in place to outline the expectations, then that could be worked and worded such that, there wouldn't be a limited number of teachers who could serve in that role, because these would just be expectations of that adult leadership credential or the classroom excellence. So if you had a list of expectations that where those teachers could lead within their schools, there wouldn't be an issue of having a limited number of those positions, which is good.
Okay.
And this is Vivian. I have also the comment that, again, in order to move, I know you can stay at license 4, and I think there was a salary increase if you were not, if you did not do classroom excellence or adult leadership, if you continue to get 3 out of 5 years. But again, that's to me values those folks who have that desire, and yeah, there are extra skills, but just because I don't choose to do those other 2 jobs, I continue to get less pay. So I have a little concern about these last 2 roles in general.
Okay. All right, anything else? Yes, thank you, Kim. And here's where it talks about employment. All right, I don't hear anything else on these. Wesley, anything else around this part?
Yeah, I think I need more clarity on that second bullet.
Okay.
I'm not sure I understand maybe a scenario where what that would look like.
So I think it means, and then we can ask DPI to chime in. I think it means the same thing. Like, you can hold this license, but that doesn't mean that you would actually have a position where you would get paid the extra 30%. I think it's the same conversation. Tom, would you like to chime in and tell me if I'm correct or incorrect?
Yeah, no, that is correct. This recognizes the local, the LEA or the PSU's authority over employment. So they have the control of the employment side of this, but the license, but that decision to remove them from the position does not have impact on the license.
Okay, so it's the same conversation. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sorry, this is Jeff. Okay, I think a good analogy is a master's of school administration. A teacher who has an MSA but is working in the classroom is not getting paid as an assistant principal, even though they are qualified to be an assistant principal. It's not until they are hired into an assistant principal position, then do they get the pay. But if they go back to the classroom, they still keep the license. They're just now back as a classroom teacher. I think that's probably the best analogy for both the classroom excellence and the adult leadership, is that idea of like an assistant principal, is that you're not getting the benefits of the pay until you're hired into the position. But you can hold the certification. You're just not eligible for the pay until you're hired into the position. Similar to an MSA.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, my issue with that is I'm continuing to teach students and get growth out of them. And because I'm not teaching more students or acting as a mentor, whatever that last category is, I mean, to me, that looks like that's valued more than staying in a classroom and growing a student. I guess I see those as pretty darn equal. If this, rule number 1 on what we reviewed today is this good for kids. That teacher in that classroom growing those students every year, to me, is just as good as someone who enjoys helping teachers grow. That's kind of the point I was trying to make before.
Vivian, this is Maureen, and one of the things that I think could be really powerful about this model is that, we do have some teachers that would really benefit from having that adult leadership teacher there to help them, probably just with one or two things that they're able to modify in their teaching practice and identify through reflection, and with some assistance from someone to help them with some strategies and some methods to bridge those gaps that they're having with their kids so that they're able to improve their teaching practice. So that we have more teachers that are doing exactly what you said, growing all the kids in their classroom. And I think that's a real benefit for the kids in our classroom. And it's also a real benefit for the teachers in our schools, because one of the primary reasons why teachers leave education is not because of the pay, it's because of the work environment. And it's because they don't feel supported. So if we have a way to help support them and improve the work environment, I think that would be really impactful and credible for the kids and the teachers in our state.
Yeah, I totally agree with you for the people who wish to do that. I just don't see that as more valuable than the teacher who wishes to stay in the classroom and not do that. So I totally agree with you. I'm sure there are a lot of Maureen Stovers out there who would love to do this because they're doing it for nothing, like I did with an old mentor license 100 years ago. There are people who thrive on that. There are also people who thrive on growing kids. I love teaching chemistry and wanted the kids to do great on the EOG and get into college and not have to take freshman chem. I get that, but not everybody is a Maureen Stover. But that doesn't mean they're any less valuable to the school system by being able to continue to get, not get less pay than someone who chooses to do what you do. Because the jobs, to me, they bifurcate. It reminds me of the military. My dad was a sergeant major. There's a master gunnery sergeant. They're the exact same rank. They get the same pay, but they do very different jobs because that's where their passion is. That's the point I'm making. It's not to keep other teachers from doing this. I'm all for that. I just don't think that one should be valued more over the other in terms of pay.
And I apologize if that's how my comment came off. That is not what I meant at all. I do think that all teachers should be valued in our classrooms because they all are filling in very important roles and doing really important things. I think that the pay distinction came because of the additional workload that those teachers in the 4AL would have. So they would be doing additional duties that are currently not expected of them and would have significantly more work that they would be doing. So it's more being compensated for the duties that you're doing versus being more valued than a classroom teacher.
Well, and also, Dr. Covington, the teacher who chooses not to pursue the advanced certifications or those positions, they're still getting salary increases under the current model at each renewal cycle. So if they choose to stay in the classroom and not pursue the advanced roles and continue to show growth of the impact on their students, then they're continuing to get raises throughout their career by staying in, by not pursuing an advanced role as well.
So if I'm at 56K at expert teacher and I get 5,000, I believe was the proposed amount, I'll be at 61 after I've done that for 5 years, and then I'll move to 65 if I get to do it again. So what about the advanced teacher and the adult leadership teacher? Do they stay at 61 and 72, or do they get additional increases as well?
As I understand it, and I think as Maureen said, because of the increased responsibilities, there is a stipend on top of, or a supplement on top of whatever their base salary would be. Again, because they're different roles, like you said with in your military analogy, but there's a higher level of expectation.
Vivian,
higher level than growing student growth. Okay, that's good to know.
Vivian, I think also, sorry, Jeff.
Oh, go ahead.
So Vivian, I was just going to go back to your military model as well. So when my husband and I were both first lieutenants, second lieutenants, first lieutenants, and captains, our base pay was the same, but he was making significantly more money than me in flight pay because he had significantly more responsibility than I did and had much longer work hours and had a lot more things that he was expected to do during his duty day. And I think that's what we're talking about here. We're not saying that you're more important. Growing kids is the main objective of this whole thing. But when you have a teacher who is working in one of those adult leadership roles, they would be working with multiple teachers and impacting multiple kids in multiple classrooms. And they would have additional work to do in the mentoring, providing the feedback, going back with teachers to reflect with them, helping teachers with their data analysis. So they would have a lot of significantly different roles than what they had as a classroom teacher. Their work would still be supporting classroom teachers and helping kids grow, but they would have additional duties beyond what their classroom teacher duties had been before they became the adult leadership teacher. And because of that, they would be compensated for those additional duties and the additional work time that they would be spending. I also think in some of the conversations that I've had with folks that potentially they would be the kind of teacher who does not get planning, right? Because they don't have a classroom where they're preparing for students. So they would be working the full day. They would not get the planning period. And I know North Carolina, some districts are able to do this, but when I was teaching in Florida and taught all 7 class periods, I did get additional pay for teaching that 7th class period and giving up my planning.
Okay, all right. So we have a conversation about the role of a teacher that decides to stay in the classroom and focus on their own students versus someone who steps out and has a role with other adults in the building. So, Tamika, did you have a question? You put question in the chat.
I did have a question, and I was trying to wait into this particular piece of the conversation to round it out. But my question and overlying concern is, how will the state work to ensure that there is equity amongst school districts regarding these particular top 2 roles? And it was mentioned earlier, because again, if I am a teacher in a particularly rural district that is limited for funds, and I want to do advanced teaching roles and my district can't afford it, and then I leave to go to a more affluent school district, if we are centering the question about is it good for students, then this particular model could also then just again perpetuate disparities among school districts because they just simply don't have the funds or resources to offer these advanced opportunities for educators with pay and positions. And so I think it's something that we definitely have to consider and press for questions about, or else we just end up recreating systems of inequity, this model.
Thank you.
Tamika, if I could reply to that, this is Jill. I think to Brenda's point, the funding, the compensation committee is envisioning that every district will have money available for advanced teaching roles. Am I correct in that, Brenda?
Yeah, we actually have not had, I completely agree that this needs to be a priority. Tamika, thank you for raising it. It absolutely has to be of the utmost importance. And so far what we found is sort of the opposite, mostly because the Title I schools and the higher poverty schools, if you look at the quartiles or quintiles we have in our facts and figures, actually have 30% more funding than more affluent schools. So there is a little bit more money in those schools on average. And so we're seeing that these programs are happening more in Title I schools. Now, to your point, if the funding becomes equal across the state, making sure that there are other, I think this is ripe for a conversation about, I don't think within this plan, but ripe for a conversation about incentives to work in Title I schools on top of this. What it will do, regardless, is if 20% of the roles are advanced roles, you will still see people moving into, and or staying in higher poverty schools, high need schools, because there's only, there's a lot, but there's only 20%. So it will work, but at some point when it's permeated across the entire state, I think there should be a real authentic conversation about additional compensation in high need schools. But I think that's outside of the scope of this plan, but absolutely worthy of a conversation. For now, we are not seeing a negative effect. If anything, we're at 82% of the ATR schools are currently Title I schools.
Okay. I see a hand from Jill and also Brenda, so I want to make sure.
Sorry, this is Jill. I don't know. I should have taken my hand down. Sorry.
Are you good? Okay.
Yeah,
all right. No, that's fine. That's fine. Okay.
And I just wanted to echo Tamika's concern, and that right now we're in a good place, and we need to keep an eye on that.
Okay.
And I'll just say too, a lot of districts already have individuals serving as instructional coaches or instructional specialists who are, providing that type of support that advanced teacher would currently. And so one of my concerns is how will those individuals, when the time comes, fit into this model, being that, they are currently not in the classroom in a lot of cases and do not have the student surveys, the EVOS scores, to meet the criteria. So that'll be something that'll have to be, that we'll have to keep an eye on as we move forward with those models for instructional support as well.
Okay. All right. Tamika, that help that conversation for now, or just still thinking?
We're okay for now. We can look at it.
All right. I appreciate it. All right. So we wanted to come back around to a few things that have come up in our last meetings, because after this meeting, again, we want to come back to the models and say, this is what we propose instead, or we agree with what's proposed already. So this is our last kind of piece for feedback. And one of the things that came up, there were two major things that came up, and one was the role of the EPP, particularly for traditionally prepared teachers, because again, we know that traditionally prepared teachers in North Carolina have the highest impact according to our data. And then the second one is student surveys. We've had a lot of conversations and a lot of hesitation around student surveys. So I wanted to make sure that we have a bit of time for these two conversations. So I just, Brenda, we can do that. All right, so I want to make sure that we have a time for this conversation about the role of the EPP, and then we'll move for maybe like 10 minutes, and then we'll move to the conversation about student surveys. I asked for this particularly to be put on the agenda from my viewpoint, because I felt like this was kind of, this still is a question for me, and I didn't know if it was a question for other people about how we incentivize traditional teacher prep if we know that provides great outcomes for students. So that's the question that I have around this. So anyone would like to discuss the role of EPPs, particularly for traditionally prepared teachers? And there's a lot of activity in the chat.
Dr. Bullock, this is Jeff Coltrane again. So maybe this is understood already, but obviously, teachers who come, or teacher candidates who come through the traditional pathway will be well prepared to fit right into License 3, which means there's a salary incentive to pursue that traditional route. And so those teachers come out making $7,000 under the current model, more than peers who come in as a License 1, or $5,000 more than a License 2. As long as those teachers meet the requirements, which I think most of our teacher candidates coming out of EPPs meet those requirements. And then, as I understand it, for License 1 and 2, those teachers have to be affiliated in the same way they do with as a residency, but under the current residency license with an EPP. And so those EPPs are providing the same types of supports that our current residency teachers are getting in license 1 and 2. And, you know, our, under this current model, there would be the professional advancement account that would allow them to cover some of those costs affiliated with their collaboration with the EPP.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. I think my recommendation for our committee would be to make it very clear at license 3 what the role of the traditional EPP is. I don't think it's very clear. I think it's assumed, but I don't think I think it can be clear, right? In part of our marketing piece that we talked about last time, that maybe it's a marketing, I said it, maybe it's a marketing issue of the model that is not clear the role of the traditional EPP in it. Anybody else? I appreciate those comments.
And Dr. Bullock, by clear, do you mean the role that the EPP would play in the teachers, like once they're in the classroom as a license 3 teacher, or are you saying the role of the EPP in getting the teacher to license 3? Does that make sense?
This is Ann speaking. I know you know it's Ann, but I'm just saying it's my opinion. For me, it is that's where you would land automatically if you successfully complete a traditional EPP program. I still think it's clear.
And I think in our last meeting, someone suggested that because that simple graphic is being distributed very, very widely, that going back to that graphic and making that more significant in the graphic would be helpful just right off the bat.
Yes. For the marketing piece, right? Yeah. So, because I know that's not the intent. I mean, Joe, you said that the intent of the state board was not to de-incentivize traditional EPPs in this model. So I believe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I believe that's pretty close.
No, I mean, why would we do that? They're our best. I mean, that was never in anyone's mind. And I wasn't speaking for the state board. I was speaking for the round table. It certainly wasn't in the state board's mind either.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. All right.
So Dr. Bullock, this is Vivian again. I couldn't hear all that Jeff said. So are we saying that the license 1 and 2 people have to affiliate with an EPP still? Is that what he said? The intent was?
That is correct. Under the draft model, they have to affiliate with an EPP. I don't know if we have those slides of those license 1 and 2 available.
And I believe that the school districts I'll speak for Wesley. I believe, Wesley, that we would think the school districts would be supportive of that, correct? For the EPPs to monitor?
I think so, yes.
And so where it says under license 2, where they can do content and pedagogy by an approved micro-credentials, we're saying that can't happen because they have to do it with an EPP. That's what I'm having a hard time reconciling. It doesn't say that under license 1, but it does say that under license 2.
My thought was once they affiliate with EPP, then while they're in that process of completing that program, once they achieve criteria for license 2, that their salary could change at any point during that program. I may be overthinking it or not thinking through it enough, but that was kind of my thoughts of just the way I look at the model. I don't know if that's the way it was envisioned or not, but that's the way I've interpreted it.
So let me see if this makes sense to anybody but me, probably not. But I affiliate with an EPP and I do whatever that is to clear that license 1 and or license 2, and then I can use the state test or a micro-credential or some other approved process to do what? Get to license 3? I'm still not understanding why there's a choice there if we're affiliating with an EPP, whether that be a Charlotte Meck, a Guilford, or a Teachers for Tomorrow out of Texas or East Carolina.
I don't know the answer, Vivian.
Am I the only one confused, or does that make sense? I don't even know there was a question there. I'm trying to ask a question.
So I don't know that I have. Jeff,
I can help.
Go ahead, Tom.
What, Jeff, you broke up.
No, I hear Tom chiming in. I'll let Tom respond.
So for a license 1, the idea is that the person has to hold a bachelor's degree. There's no expectation of any type of content or pedagogy or demonstration of the effectiveness of their content or pedagogy. Then licensed, in order to hold a license 2, one must meet some basic level of content and pedagogy. And the way one demonstrates that is articulated in those different measures. You can use the licensure exam, you could use the micro-credentials. I do believe that on both of those, there is some kind of direction, support. It is vague, but there is support by the EPP and the PSU as defined in the MOU. So there is contemplation that folks are doing this under the guidance of an EPP and their employer, and that there are multiple routes to establishing their competency, their level of competency in order to advance to the next license level.
Okay, that's the way I understood it originally, and then I think one of our other meetings we said those were just licensure requirements. They were not ways to get to the license. So now I'm hearing my first interpretation from you this time. So if I'm going to provide support, then, as an EPP would require someone to do either one of our micro-credentials, I assume, or to enroll here. I can't provide support for someone who's doing a micro-credential from another entity. I guess that entity would provide the support. So to me, there's no obligation there for someone to affiliate with an EPP. If DPI had some micro-credentials that we have talked about in the past, they could do those.
So I would see it as the same process we currently have. What we have now is EPPs prepare their students in the way that they see best. And at the end of that preparation, there is some verification that they learned the things they were supposed to do as manifest through the praxis or the Pearson exams and the EdTPA or PPAT. The micro-credentials would serve that same function exactly as the verification of the content and the competency to hold the license. I think the question came up that I addressed was there was some question whether micro-credentials themselves were a program. And we said, no, we don't see those as a program. We see those as one of the measures to demonstrate the competency to hold the license.
Okay, I think that helps. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anything, and also we have the purview to suggest something different on that licensure level as well in terms of measures as purview for this committee. Vivian, just to keep that in mind and for Vivian and everyone else. So So if we don't like the way it's written or want to say something different, we can. All right. So also
Can I just add, sorry, one thing. I've had my hand up.
I'm sorry, I couldn't see it.
That's okay. I actually see this model. It's interesting to hear people say that you see it as like disincentivizing educator prep programs. I actually see it as incentivizing them because, but again, I think it's like in terms of how it's framed or communicated because, I think that ed prep programs can make a case that you will move, like you can move directly to license 3, or perhaps, if you come in as a license 1 and you're trying to move more quickly through the different levels, like you can do it more quickly if you are working with an ed prep program than if you're not. And so to me, it's more about communicating to prospective candidates that EPPs, and I'll say high quality EPPs, are going to be better able to get them the higher salary more quickly, and because they're going to get them the skills more quickly. And so I really do see it as a communication and kind of marketing campaign more so than like a licensure issue, because I think the licensure levels basically say like, yeah, you can come in with a bachelor's degree, but you don't get paid as much as if you come in being able to demonstrate all of these different types of skills and knowledge. And so I think it's about communicating that, and like that may not immediately jump out at people from, again, like that one pager, but I think it's about figuring out how to frame it in a way that says like the fastest way from point A to point B is through a high quality EPP. And here are some other options if for whatever reason that's not viable.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anyone else?
And this is Brad at Charlotte. So I'm hearing some different things. I guess I just really like the question answered, and well, before I say that, so I mean, Tom mentioned that these additional measures, really, that those are alternative ways to satisfy a testing requirement, right? That's not going to replace the EPP. So is EPP enrollment required for License 2? And is EPP completion required for License 3? Because I think we need to differentiate between being required and just a faster route.
Brad, can you clarify what you mean by EPP completion? I'm just thinking of, for example, somebody who has a bachelor's degree in biology. What would that look like for them?
Residency.
Right, that's what I was thinking.
Right, but when you say completion, does that mean a degree in teaching? I'm just curious what you're, just for clarification.
It doesn't have to be a full degree. It could be a post-baccalaureate option like many of our residency programs currently are. So someone would not need to have a separate undergraduate degree in teaching. But they still will all complete an approved program with a student teaching internship, even if that happens to be in their own classroom, like residents currently do.
Brad, I would be curious for someone from DPI or from somewhere to answer that, because I don't know that it's clear in the model. I mean, again, we can suggest what we think is clear. I know there's a whole committee on rapid entry, which I'm not sure where their role is in this, but I do think that I would say that the answer for the license 3 is yes, because to get to license 4, you have to complete all the things related to licensure, like what I call the general things related to licensure. Tom, would you like to do you have a response to Brad?
I do. Okay. So those two questions are under the purview of preparation and entry and advancement and development. So where you land, given what you've done, and how you move forward from where you are, that question of is the EPP only path through that? Those are issues for the those two subcommittees to resolve. As always, this subcommittee is free and encouraged to, if you have opinions on this, to approve them in your subcommittee and send them on to those committees who have purview over those subjects.
Do they have a stance on that question as of now?
I don't think they've met.
Weigh in?
Pardon?
Oh, I was asking Maureen if she wanted to jump in. She's a co-chair of that Advancement and Development Subcommittee. Maybe she had to jump off. I will just say, as a member of the Advancement and Development Committee, that was my understanding. And again, I'm not speaking for the group, but like my understanding based on our prior conversations was that each license level was essentially preparation pathway agnostic, that if you can meet the requirements for that license level, whether it's license 2 or 3, then you are eligible to get that license, regardless of what type of formal preparation you've had. Again, that was my understanding, but things are, as we all know, continually being discussed, and we haven't met in a while. So, but that was my last understanding of where we were.
Is that Hank and Van? Who are the co-chairs?
That is correct. Hank and Van, Dr. Weddington and Dr. Dempsey are the co-chairs of the Prep and Entry. Maureen Stover and Michael Marr are the co-chairs of Advancement Development.
Of what? I'm sorry, you dropped off on the end. Maureen is what?
Maureen and Michael Marr are the co-chairs of the Advancement and Development Subcommittees.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And I guess, that was back to my original comment that I got some grief over about de-incentivizing license 3, right? So why do student teaching and not be able to get paid when I can start down there at license 1, make 38, and start working my way up, start getting vested in the state by the time I get to license 3, and I can use any method I want to meet that criteria because they're pathway agnostic. So that goes back to my original concern, which I thought I had moved past, but now I have again.
Dr. Could you elaborate on that a little bit on the scenario that you're talking about? Are you talking about somebody who's 18 and choosing their pathway? Or are you talking about somebody who's partway through undergraduate? I'm not following that.
I'm talking about somebody who who could come here, get a bachelor's degree in anything, and start working at 38K and do a pathway and continue to get paid 38K while they do it, and move into license 2 when they meet half that criteria and be making 40K. And by the time they get to license 3, they're vested in the state of North Carolina. They would have worked 5 years at least. They get to license 3, then now they're making 45, as opposed to someone who comes out of a traditional EPP at license 3, who, yes, would be making 45, and only, by the way, on this model, only has 3 years to get 3 out of 5 years to convert to license 4. Whereas if I came through at license 1, I could have gotten 2 or 3 years at 38K, 2 or 3 years at 40K, was able to get my 3 of 5 years in order to, move along or get up there to license 4, because I can jump over license 3 if I meet that criteria and have 3 of 5 years of teaching excellence, however we define that. So why would I do a traditional program and student teach and not get paid and not be able to work while I'm doing that, when I could start with just a bachelor's degree and move up to license 1, license 2, and then over to 3, up to 50, up to 4, if I get my 3 out of 5 years using those measures? I don't, people keep saying I'm crazy because it disincentivizes an EPP, but I don't see how it does not.
I'll just jump in and say, I want to be clear, I never said anyone was crazy for saying that it disincentivizes EPPs. I just said I didn't see it that way. I saw it as motivating enrollment in EPPs. And again, this is just like the way I perceive it. But when Vivian, you were describing that movement, it was like, they're just like, and they're getting to license 2 and they're getting to license 3, but because in this licensure framework, getting to isn't just like putting your time in, getting to is actually demonstrating competency, proficiency. In order to gain that, how are they gaining those skills, right? Like, that's what it comes down to. Is it like, oh, they're just learning it on the job because the professional development opportunities in their district, or like, do you think that is sort of what you're implying?
Well, yeah,
I just don't quite like follow the logic. Like,
no disrespect to the school districts that are training people. I don't have an opinion whether they're good, bad, or ugly, but there's no tuition, there's no GPA requirements, there's no admission to a university. So I do what I'm asked to do, my employer. I can do it well. I'm getting paid. I'm going to get vested in the state of North Carolina while I'm learning, as opposed to coming 4 years to a university and then waiting and coming out and having to wait 5 years to be vested.
I understand the downsides. What I don't understand is, I can understand all the downsides you've laid out in that argument. I think they're real. I completely understand them. What I don't understand is do you think people can get from license 1 to license 2 and to license 3 all on their own, or do they need to engage in some sort of preparation? So I think the case that we're making here for why people should enroll in an EPP is that they can't actually get to that place without engaging in some sort of formal preparation. And so I guess that's the piece that I'm trying to reconcile, is that I'm both hearing people say, well, you need to engage in an EPP in order to get these skills, but they're going to get these skills without going to an EPP. And so that's the piece I'm trying to reconcile, is like, how are they getting the competencies to get to license 2 and license 3 without going through some sort of more formal preparation pathway?
Yeah, and I guess that depends if we say they have to, right?
No, I guess that's exactly what I'm saying is no, right? Like, why would we have to force them to do it if they can't get to license 2 or license 3 on their own? Then they have to utilize something else, right? Like some sort of training entity, some sort of preparation program. I think this is the piece that I'm not understanding in the argument, is that what do we think people are going to do in the absence of a preparation pathway to gain the competencies required for license 2 and license 3?
Being a really good test taker and take the test. You don't have to have a lick of content. You be a really good test taker. You have a passion for science. You study. You take the science licensure exam, and you now have content. So you've moved to license 2 from license 1. You haven't affiliated with
You need
any.
to demonstrate content and pedagogy for license 2 and for license 3.
Okay, so then I do the EdTPA. I'm in my classroom. I have my students.
Dr. Covington, if I can ask on this, well, two factors, just pure data points, right? 35% of our new teachers right now are coming through residency. That's, these are just kids, right, who at 18 didn't decide to go and they decided to take a different path, and then as adults decided to come into teaching. This model is meant to prepare to support those people in a better way. In terms of EPP enrollment, if you're 18 and you're trying to decide, or even if you're in a residency situation and trying to decide on whether to enroll in an EPP, I think the number one biggest factor is EPPs are the best preparers of teachers. Like, the data is abundantly clear that traditionally prepared candidates will get up this chart faster, and EPPs can market that and say, 96% of our graduates are a license 4, within 3 years of leaving our program, or whatever those statistics are, and they'll be able to say that, whereas the biology department won't be able to say that. If they're really intent on being a teacher, the evidence is going to be abundantly clear that going through an EPP is going to be better prepared and that marketing should be there and made available. So I hear your concerns, and I think they're all incredibly valid. And I think when you walk through walking through a candidate and their experience, they're not reflecting at 18 years old whether or not to go a biology route and then be a license 1 and then be a license 2 and forego the income when they could go hop straight to license 3. I don't see that happening. I see this really elevating the entire role of the profession and seeing an increase in enrollment in EPPs, but also respecting the fact that a tremendous number of people are choosing the teaching profession after they've graduated from college. And what do we do with those folks?
Okay. All right. Let's try to move on to student surveys. Thank you all for your comments on that. And we took some good notes on that. So I think it's important that we be very clear again about the role of the EPP and that it's specifically, and then what impact that has on the other things that are listed on the model sheet. We'll continue this conversation. Let's just take about, we have about 5 minutes to talk about student surveys. So I just wanted to make sure that we had a chance to come, because I know some people were like, I think this is a good option. And other people were like, I don't think we really, this barely passed, right, with the number of people that were actually at the meeting that day. So I just wanted to give us one more chance to say anything we wanted to say about student surveys in the next 4 minutes.
And has this committee seen the data that backs up student surveys, or data that would do the opposite? Have we examined that? Because I know there is data out there.
So Kim, pull that for us. Thank you, Kim. Go ahead.
This is from the presentation that Ms. Tooley and Ms. Comstock provided as background for each of the measures that were being considered during the July meeting.
Yeah. So we have, but here it is, some of it again for your consideration. And there's another slide as well. We'll leave this one up, Kim, and then you can do your magic. Tamika, you have your hand raised, I see.
So I remember that discussion of a few meetings back around student surveys, and I was one of the people that voted against them. One because the student survey data is some of the most subjective, the most fluctuating piece of data that a teacher could get. I know in the small groups when we were talking about student surveys and we were doing the breakouts in those meetings, student surveys are good data points to help educators refine their teaching practices, and they do offer valuable anecdotal data as well for a teacher. But to tie it to somebody's licensure renewal is one that is extremely problematic. Just noting that there are variables about how a student relates to a certain content area. For example, if I have a student in my classroom I'm teaching math, and that student hates math because it's difficult and challenging for them, their responses on the student survey could differ wildly whether or not they feel a certain way around the content. Also, just depending on how that teacher has a relationship with that student as well can also impact the data that we get back on student surveys. And so I believe it's good to have a component in like teacher observations and things of that nature, but to tie it to licensure is extremely problematic.
Thank you for sharing those thoughts. Okay. Any comments on what Tamika said, or any other comments or comments on this data? Kim, do you want to skip to the next slide just so people can see both?
Dr. Bullock, this is Jeff Coltrane again. And I think Dr. Tomerlin can answer this. I believe that there are some student surveys that were piloted in North Carolina a decade ago that have been available for districts to use, and there's some districts that are using them voluntarily. And I wonder if you could share a little bit about what that experiences look like. And then also, if there's a way to share what the instruments so that we can see what the student surveys look like and the types of questions that are being asked.
Dr. Bullock, if I could follow up on Jeff. I've been doing a lot of research to really understand the impact that student surveys would have and the way that student surveys have been conducted to effectively tie them to teacher effectiveness. And research does indicate, and I'm happy to share this with you, to share it with the subcommittee or however it's the best way to get it to everybody, but significant number of studies that find that student surveys are reliable measures of teacher effectiveness, and they're consistent across school years for the same instructor. Also that different groups of students, so like students that are in different classes or different grade levels, had similar perceptions of a teacher's strengths and weaknesses. The research also finds that student surveys are valid measures of teacher effectiveness. So the student surveys are correlated with student achievement on standardized tests, specifically for students of teachers ranking the top 25th percentile based on student survey results. Student ratings are more likely correlated with student achievement than principal ratings and teacher self-ratings. So I'm not going to take up much more time, but just wanted to say that there is some really solid research-based evidence that indicates that those student surveys are very effective in determining a teacher's effectiveness, and it's one of the best ways to correlate a teacher's impact on a student and their ability to grow that student throughout the school year.
I think thank you. I think there's a couple of comments in the chat that I think are real important just to wrap this up, is that, and there's something on this slide that I think is real important, that the age of the student will matter, right? We do know that is important to recognize under challenges. We talk about K2, which surveys used, and that it's not the only option, right? That a teacher wouldn't have to do it. Tamika, you want to make our last comment for our meeting today? Feel free.
I had meant to put my hand down. No, I didn't. But some of my concerns are already on the screen, particularly with our younger students as noted as well, and for educators who are not general classroom teachers. Like I taught 500 students. How do I know which students' surveys would count in regards to my license renewal? Or an EC teacher, how do you do student surveys when we know those students have challenges on a regular administered test? So those are things that should be considered before we tie student surveys to licensure.
Yes, I agree. So, all right, well, we're out of time, and that perfectly sums it up. Kim, is there anything besides a motion to dismiss that we need to talk about before we leave?
I just want to bring to everyone's attention that one of the reminders that was on the slide that I didn't put in the PowerPoint that I have provided to the other subcommittees, and I'll make sure to have it in the next PowerPoint, is that we do not have to have quorum in order to make decisions for subcommittees. So I just wanted to make that abundantly clear. So, according to whatever the measures are or what we vote on, that is up to who can be present. And, if we decide to survey folks after the meeting, which we did last time, that can be the decision that is being made. I just want to emphasize that quorum does not have to be met.
Okay, and you were going to also, do you have the timeline, or do you just want to talk about it, or do you want to send it out to this committee so they can see it?
Let me just grab it really quick.
Sorry, y'all, we're going a few minutes over. I want to make sure everybody sees.
Sorry about that, everyone.
While you're looking, well, I can't do that because then we'll leave.
I can grab it very quickly again. Sorry about that. Okay.
Dr. Bullock, while she's looking for that, I would like us to address the concerns that you can only stay 3 years in license 3.
Yes.
You have to have 3 or 5 years. I don't know if that was addressed. I had to step out. I'm sorry.
No, we didn't get to that, but I did bring that up. Wesley and I sent that forward well, actually, we talked about it in our prep meeting with Tom and Kim. So this is the estimated timeline. So we have the summer, basically, to determine what we want to do for each of these levels. So prepare to come to the next meeting, ready to discuss what we want to take in and out of these levels or what we want to suggest. So, Wesley, anything else?
No, I think you've covered it.
Then,
Really
so, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Kim. Go ahead.
The next meeting is June 15th at 9 to 11 a.m.
Thank you. All right, so, and Kim, you can also send this out, right? This estimated timeline to everybody to make sure people have it. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you all for discussing all the things and for your honest and transparent discussion today around the last levels of licensure and the two items that we brought back, student surveys and the role of the EPP. So we need a motion to dismiss.
So moved.
Thank you. And a second?
Second, Tamika.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of dismissing, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, we are dismissed. So I'm not even, anybody nay? Anybody doesn't want to leave?
Thank you, Anne. Take care.
Thank you, Brenda. Hey, Brenda, I sent you a question in the chat. Did you see it?
Oh, no, I didn't. I'll look.
What, I couldn't wrap at this moment, I couldn't wrap my brain around IC.
Oh, instructional,
Coach,
yes.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure I was correct.
Yeah, absolutely. That was such a great observation because there would be a conversion time where those folks should be able to, kind of grandfather back into the process. And I think I'd be happy to host some conversations with ATR districts on how they're doing that currently. But I love that idea of kind of recognizing that as a hiccup. So,
okay,
but it would be short term, right? Once that they're converted, it's okay. It would be taken care of. So,
all right. Thank you, Brenda. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you, Kim.
Thanks.